This podcast is free, and it's accessible to everyone thanks to support from listeners like you. If you value this show, please consider supporting its production by donating to our home, KUOW. It only takes a minute to give, and you'll be helping to support the production of this podcast. Make a donation at kuow.org or follow the link in the show notes. And thanks!
These days, getting a campsite can feel harder than scoring Taylor Swift tickets.
The great outdoors have drawn many thousands of newcomers to the Pacific Northwest, but our trails and campgrounds haven't kept up with the boom.
Has the pursuit of the perfect photo gotten out of hand, with hikers haphazardly parked along highways to confrontations at the trailhead?
Our national parks were the ideal getaway from pandemic life. Turns out millions of other people had the same idea.
Our parks are buckling under the weight of so many visitors. Does everybody have the right to experience nature whenever they want?
And if so, can we find a better way to share it?
I'm Joshua McNichols.
And I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
Today on Booming, what's driving the campground crunch? And what we can do to protect our parks from the Northwesterners who love them a little too hard. That's coming up in a minute. But first, Monica, what have you been working on?
This week, I went downtown to the Pacific Place Mall in Seattle because one of their last big stores, Lululemon, announced it's closing at the end of the month.
Did they say why?
They didn't respond to questions about why they're shutting this particular location down, but an employee told me that things have been pretty slow since the pandemic.
Okay. Well, stores open and close all the time, so what's special about this one?
Well, this mall has kind of become a symbol of downtown's struggle to recover from the pandemic. It's kind of eerie in there when you go in. Like, people call it a ghost mall. I chatted with one shopper from out of town, and she actually asked me, is Lululemon shutting down, or is it the whole mall that's closing?
You know, I was surprised there's no stores in here. I came in here thinking, oh, there's going to be a lot of stores in here, and there wasn't. And it's a very nice mall, so that's kind of sad, actually.
Now, we should note, the owner of the Pacific Place Mall says, hey, this is still a vibrant place to visit. We've got this pop-up program that allows small businesses to temporarily set up shop here. But I gotta say, the vibes in there tell a different story.
Okay, that pop-up thing sounds like what they're trying in the rest of downtown, what the city's trying to do. You know, they could always just lower the rent. It could become like a giant multi-story antique mall or something.
Well, now you're speaking my language. I would go there if it was an antique mall, but as it stands, I really only go sometimes to see a movie or to the Din Tai Fung restaurant at the top, which are really the only big draws at this point.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I know where all the people went. Coming up next, why finding solitude in nature these days feels like trying to get some personal time with the Mona Lisa, and what we can do to change that.
Every summer, thousands of pleasure-seeking tourists head for the great outdoor playgrounds of America. And the favorite spot is this wonderland of nature called Jellystone National Park.
Every day it's the same old thing. Look at the bears, look at the bears, look at the bears. Sheesh.
Hey, Pop! Look at the bears, look at the bears, look at the bears!
Monica, I know you and your family love to go hiking and camping. What's been your experience trying to reserve a campsite?
Well, it's definitely getting harder. Like, summer before last, I wanted to do a camping trip for my son's first birthday. We wanted to go with our neighbors. They have a little boy who has the same birthday, and we wanted to go out on the Olympic Peninsula somewhere near the water. But I know from experience that it is impossible to find a campsite out there near the water. So I decided to go with Hip Camp, which is kind of like Airbnb for campgrounds. Yeah. People with a lot of land can set something up, varying levels of facilities, and you can rent the space, usually for a little bit more than a private campground. So I found something on the water. It looked great. It had great reviews. We rented it. We packed up all the children and all the gear and drove all the way out there and avoided any major meltdowns. And we got there, and it was not as advertised.
Oh?
First of all, the host wasn't there, so we just got out and kind of started walking around. And there was old construction equipment, rusty nails. The kids immediately flung their shoes off, as children do. And we were like, we can't stay here. So we're out all the way on the peninsula with all of our stuff and no place to stay. We left and we went to a beach nearby and kind of tried to problem solve. And we ended up renting a couple of tents at a glamping resort, which is actually a great place. It's called Mike's Beach Resort. They have big, beautiful canvas tents. And, it was easy with kids. It was set up. They have electricity. But it cost about the same as a hotel.
Wow. How'd you find them, though?
I texted a friend who lived in Port Townsend, help, and she had some recommendations.
Okay, totally the old-fashioned way. Well, not texting, but, calling a friend.
Yeah, phone a friend. I know I can't be the only one frustrated by this.
No, lots of people are frustrated by this. And it's not just with campsites. It's also with trails and just getting into parks. Like take Mount Rainier, for example. On summer weekends, in the middle of the day, the lines get super long, like 2 to 3 hours just to get in. And trails are packed. And so Mount Rainier is going to require timed entry reservations for the first time this year. Kind of like museums do, when they have like a Van Gogh exhibit or a Da Vinci exhibit or something. And if you want to visit Mount Rainier this summer, you have to reserve your time slot now.
Yeah, I'm not camping this summer because I'm going to have a newborn. But if I were, I would say April. I'd already feel kind of behind the curve at this point.
Yeah. So I drove up to Mount Rainier or down to Mount Rainier to talk to people about it. And I interviewed Ranger Terry Tucker. She's the head planner for the park. And she told me how the timed entry works and why it was important.
Our goal is not to deter folks from visiting their park. We just want to pace it out.
So the goal is just to make it easier to get into the park?
Yeah, by reducing lines. But there are other reasons too. All those people in line then head up to Paradise, where they crowd the trails.
A lot of folks come to Mount Rainier in the summertime because they really want to see and experience our iconic, beautiful subalpine wildflower meadows. And when you have a lot of people there at the same time, we find because folks are polite, they're stepping off the trail to go around the group in front of them or looking to frame a photograph without 1,000 of their new best friends in the photo with them.
We're talking about social media here, of course.
Okay, speaking a little bit guiltily, what is so bad about giving people space on the trail or even trying to get an Instagrammable photo for that matter?
Yeah, because it feels polite, right? But the meadows are covered with snow for much of the year, and there's a really short growing season.
It's part of the reason we get such a spectacular display of wildflowers. They're all trying to bloom at the same time while they have that summer sunshine.
So it might not seem like much just to briefly step off the trail for an instant, but when you have hundreds of people doing that every day, it kills the plants. It stomps down the soil.
And it can take decades for those flowers to restore, and in fact, it often takes an active restoration program.
And it's not just wildflowers. There aren't enough parking stalls, and so people are parking on the side of the road, which also crushes native plants and invites invasive plants in. She told me more people park on the side of the road to Paradise than in the Paradise parking lot itself.
If folks stop coming because the lines are too long, because, they get into the park and they can't see the things they want to see, or those places no longer look like the beautiful meadows that they remember from their childhood, that's what we want to avoid.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of this kind of like an economist. You've got a supply of experiences on the mountain, and you've got the demand represented by all the people coming to it. And it's not really, you can't just increase the supply, because that would mean paving over more meadows or demolishing some wilderness, basically.
It's true. The number of people that live in the area has increased, and the number of national parks here has not gone up recently.
People love this place, and by restricting access during the busiest time of the day, they're actually preserving access for the future. I talked to this one couple from San Antonio, and they were there to celebrate their 2-year anniversary. They told me even though the reservation system would have made them plan ahead more, it's better than sitting in a line of cars for 2 to 3 hours to get in.
Yeah, and especially like when you have, we don't have kids at the moment, but when you have like 5 or 6-year-olds running around in the back of the car and they want to get in the park, it's hard for you to keep them entertained when you're waiting in line for so long. So I think that'll be good.
That sounds familiar. This problem seems like it caught up to us really fast. I moved here a decade ago, and I remember going to even the most popular parks like Mount Rainier was a pretty relaxing experience. It wasn't super crowded, you know. How did we get here?
Well, this change is less sudden than you might think. I mean, visits to parks have been gradually increasing for a long time as the population grows. But lately, visits to the most popular parks have increased faster than the population gains.
Okay, so that means that even though we've had this huge population boom in Seattle, we're seeing an even bigger boom at our parks?
Yes, exactly. And people are feeling it everywhere.
I stick to what I call second-tier hikes. So these are ones without really great scenery. They're certainly not...
We used to go to Birch Bay State Park, and now it's almost impossible.
We have to book right when they open 8 months ahead, and I don't always know all the calendars.
People make reservations, and they don't show up, and they don't cancel. And most of the time, we're camping in campgrounds that are pretty full reservation-wise, and no one's there.
It's a bummer, I'm not going to lie, but at least I still get out in nature.
That is so frustrating to have so much trouble getting a campsite and then to show up and realize that people are just, holding on to them for no reason?
Yeah, or maybe they had plans and they just couldn't go.
Maybe. That's a charitable way to look at it. But getting back to the big question here, why is interest in parks growing faster than the population?
Well, 2 reasons. First, there are just times in history when interest spikes. Recently, a lot of people rediscovered our parks during the pandemic, for example. You want to guess when else in American history visits to Mount Rainier increased more than 50% in 1 year? And you can, disregard the first few years of the park.
I feel like our answer is always World War II. Is it like a post-war park boom?
Yes, that was one of the biggest increases. In 1945, attendance to Mount Rainier increased 125%. And then 1946 was 55%. So all those soldiers coming back and they're like, let's hit the road,
Or maybe I've seen a lot of stuff and I need to heal in nature.
Yeah. Another fun example is in 1923, which is just a few years after World War I, but also the Spanish flu pandemic.
Okay, so the trend here seems to be we go through some serious strife in our society and turn to nature, which makes sense and fits in with what just happened with the pandemic.
Yes.
FDR once said, "There's nothing so American as our national parks." This year, they might be a little too American.
Last year, the number of visitors to Mount Rainier was 2.5 million. That's the highest number ever recorded.
After months stuck indoors, seems a lot of us are exploring the great outdoors more than ever before.
Wow. Okay. So I think that the population of Seattle, Seattle proper, is 750,000, right?
Yeah. And the Seattle metro area is about 2 million. So it's like everybody in Seattle plus their cousins went to Mount Rainier.
Which is how it feels sometimes.
Crowded trails, traffic jams, and our favorite American pastime, trying to find parking.
They paved paradise, put up a parking lot.
Okay, you said there's 2 reasons that we're seeing this big boom at our parks. What's the second one?
Well, the second reason is that people come here to the Pacific Northwest to be part of the outdoors. I mean, companies use the big famous parks nearby as a recruiting tool. They can tell prospective employees, if you move here for this job, look at all the wonderful places you'll get to visit and camp and hike. And so the people moving here tend to be younger and more interested in getting outside.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nature is so core to the identity of the Pacific Northwest. So if someone's moving here, there's a good chance that they probably prioritize getting out in nature.
Yeah. I mean, the jamming on our trails is kind of like what we're seeing in our housing market. There's a limited supply, even as demand keeps growing. And so people are gaming the system. They're sitting at their computers, hitting refresh every 10 seconds, waiting for a campsite to open up. And sometimes they're reserving campsites in 2-week chunks in hope that one of the weekends will work out. It's survival of the fastest with the keyboard.
Yeah, I mean, this is really frustrating. If you're somebody whose schedule doesn't allow you to sit there and book a campsite as soon as it opens at 7 a.m., or you're just like not as tech savvy as some of the people that you're competing with, it feels like you are kind of out of luck.
Yeah, and that's one of the big differences between this boom in getting campsites and booms of the past. You know, in this dog-eat-dog world, technology gives people an edge. For example, recreation.gov will send you an email right when somebody cancels a reservation. I actually tried to do this a couple of times, this last week, and I missed the opportunity every time because somebody jumped on it so fast.
Wow.
But there are private services like CampNab and the Dirt with a Y, of course, and they have bots that you can pay for to send you text messages. And if you act on those messages within seconds, you could win the campsite because, you're probably going to see those faster than somebody who got an email. And the more you pay, the faster the bots will alert you. The founder of CampNab, Eric Cargelotto, told me he allows alerts to wake him in the middle of the night, and he gives them a ringtone that you can't ignore.
Wow, this is feeling very dystopian to me. So are bots really the reason I can never get a campsite?
Well, yes and no. When a bot alerts you, you have to click on a link and then reserve the spot yourself. A lot of people think that bots are actually reserving the campsites themselves all at once, and that's an urban legend. Or actually, I should say a rural legend. It may have happened in the past, but today CAPTCHAs prevent it. Those are those little checkboxes that say, I'm not a robot.
Okay, so technology is one tool people are using to land a campsite in this super competitive environment, but it has some obvious downsides.
Yeah, all the solutions have some downside or another.
What are some of the other workarounds people are finding to get out in nature?
Well, because there's not enough public lands, people are turning to private lands instead. And the Dirt actually did a report on this, and it said that the supply is starting to catch up with the demand. There's a long way to go because it's so expensive still, but, we talked about hip camp earlier, and farmers are turning their fields into campsites. I was looking at one on South Bainbridge, and, it was by a little pond. It looked quite pleasant. They just had one campsite on their land. And then in other places, cider makers who have a little extra land, they're adding food experiences onto the whole package. And of course, that makes it more expensive.
Yeah, when my husband and I used to have a camper van a few years ago, we saw this platform where wineries and cider places and farms, you could just go stay there on their land. It wasn't super expensive, but you did have to bring your own toilet.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, so, like you said, there are downsides. There was my experience earlier where you don't necessarily know that you're going to get what's advertised. It can cost more. They can have less amenities. It's not a perfect solution to the public campgrounds that we know and love. It feels like this is ultimately an access issue. Not everyone can park somewhere and just camp in a really rugged condition without amenities. And not everyone can afford these private solutions. It's something that we've seen before. Like, there's limited supply of a government service and unmet demand, so the private sector comes and steps in. I always think about this at the airport because you can pay that company Clear to skip the TSA lines, or it's like private beaches that you can only access by paying a membership fee. Is this just going to be another example of that, of something that should be accessible to everyone but is becoming only accessible to those who can afford it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit disappointed about that trend. On the other hand, a lot of the great public campgrounds we know today were once private campgrounds. There's Kama Beach State Park, for example, and then parts of Mount Rainier, for example. They were private at one point. And then the government stepped down and said, this is a big public good. We're going to make it available for everybody at a lower price.
Really? It's kind of like the ferry fleet that we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yes, yeah. It was private once, and then the government bought it out because it was going to be a service everybody needed. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. It's a more positive way to think about this. Maybe we are still moving toward a future where camping is accessible to all. Should we also be thinking about the way that we experience nature differently?
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to Eric Cargelotto, again, the founder of CampNab, and he said something that really stuck with me. He has this life philosophy: go where and when people aren't there. So rather than thinking of unpopular campsites as a booby prize, finding a good spot that no one knows about feels like a treasure hunt.
It's funny because I don't really believe there's a campsite shortage. It's a little bit like concerts. There's a Taylor Swift concert ticket shortage, or it's competitive, let's say. There is no shortage of concerts you can go to. That's not hard. It's if you insist on Taylor Swift, that's going to be a toughie.
You know, and this might be controversial to say, but Taylor Swift might be the most popular musician, but she's not the best musician for everybody.
Okay, well, that's debatable, but go on.
I mean, it's a matter of personal taste. Like, I'm really digging Kurt Weill right now because his music feels kind of like an anti-anxiety drug for me. But Eric says camping is the same way. The most popular campgrounds are sometimes great, but their positive qualities are sometimes over-amplified by other forces like social media or because they're convenient to get to.
So what are the Taylor Swift of campgrounds in Washington State?
Well, for state campgrounds, it's Deception Pass State Park and Moran State Park on Orcas Island. You know, it all depends on how you measure it. In this case, I'm looking at the number of bots that are looking for vacant campsites in each of those places. There are lots of different lists ranking park popularity. Like, I've got one right here. And I mean, look at the bottom of this list.
Wait, are you about to create Washington's next most popular park?
Well, I don't think there's a big risk of that because, you know, looking at this list, a lot of them are islands. So you have to have a boat to get to them or pay a water taxi, $400 round trip to get your family there and back. But going up this list, some of them are land-based. And I'm just really curious. Maybe some of them are diamonds in the rough or will have that special something that really works for me and my family. For example, you know, there's this hiking spot I'm really excited about at Mount Rainier, and it's in this part of the park they call the Quiet Corner in the Northwest. It's not connected by road to the rest of the park. You don't need a reservation to get into that spot, you know, to hike there. And there's this beautiful rainforest trail there along the Carbon River that I totally want to go to now. It's more isolated than it used to be because there's a partially washed out road, but you can still get to this trail pretty easily. My family and I just filled out our calendar for the summer, and we're definitely going there. We're making it a weekend trip.
Oh, I'm excited to hear about your trip. I have to say, though, there is a little bit of an irony pointing out these little-known spots. And at the risk of violating a big taboo in the mushroom foraging world, I do go to Mount Rainier every fall, so the off-season, searching for chanterelles, and it's not usually crowded. It is wet and cold, though.
Yeah, and like mushroom hunters, a lot of people keep their favorite hiking spots secret so they won't become crowded. But, you know, going in the off-season or the shoulder season is a great way to avoid crowds. There's also the cultural attitude we have towards nature. We place a high value on solo encounters with the sublime.
Totally. This is a very American idea. The Thoreau, Emerson, getting out into nature and having this isolated, pure experience.
Yeah, it's very sort of Protestant, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But we won't get into that. The recent solar eclipse, you know, and the one that we had in Seattle in 2017 show how fun it can be to experience nature with other people, you know? There was sort of a festival atmosphere at a lot of these gatherings. You know, everybody's trying to go to the same spot to see the eclipse. And, you know, in some places you saw like food booths set up, and it sounds kind of fun. There was this article in Outside Magazine I was reading recently about how people hike differently in South Korea. They hike in big groups and share food communally along the trail. It's this big social event. I talked to someone from the Washington Trails Association named Anna Roth, and she seemed to have a similar attitude about the crowds.
So if you reframe this idea of being on trail with a ton of people as instead being on trail with a bunch of other people who care about the same thing you do, I think it becomes a little bit more refreshing.
You know, once you open up to the idea of hiking with more people, then maybe you simplify your life even more by taking Metro's Trailhead Direct bus service to Mount Si.
I like that idea. You know, I used to go to a lot of camping music festivals, and some of them are in really beautiful places, and you're not mad about the crowd. You're there to experience it together. You're a community.
Yeah. At campgrounds, there's always the risk. You don't know who's going to be next to you, and maybe it'll be a bunch of drunk people keeping you and your kids awake in the middle of the night. But yeah, there is some pros and cons to that method too, I guess.
Pros and cons to everything. Yeah, I mean, accessibility, like we talked about earlier, is another one that you've gotten me to think a little bit differently about. I do really think that everybody should be able to access nature, but it comes at a cost. Our parks can't bear the weight of everyone accessing them all the time.
Yeah. And success at Mount Rainier would mean not seeing a drop off in the number of visitors. It would be just seeing them spread out across more parts of the day.
It seems like what you're saying is that just like with our urban spaces, we have to find creative ways to adapt to sharing the wilderness with more people than we used to.
Yeah. If you want to find more affordable housing, it's better to buy a condo if you can find it, or townhomes are more affordable than single-family residences.
And all of these workarounds and little solutions are not going to be one size fits all. You have to find your angle, the thing that works for you. Maybe you have the time to hunt down really overlooked campsites, or maybe you can drive a farther distance, or maybe you don't need as many amenities, or maybe you can afford to get something private. But whatever the solution is, we all have to become a little bit more flexible.
Yeah, that's right. Coming up next, Monica and I are going to put these new learnings to the test.
You rely on this podcast to stay informed and connected with your local community, and we rely on you. Without listener support, this show simply wouldn't exist. Be a part of the team that makes this show possible by donating to our home, KUOW. It only takes a minute. Donate at KUOW.org or follow the link in the show notes. And thank you.
Okay, welcome back. This is The End Game, and Lucy Suchek, our producer, is going to introduce the game this week.
Yes, I'm here, and I have a really fun game for this week. I'm super excited about it, and I feel like I'm going to learn from it too. So basically the game this week is I want you guys to race to see how quickly you can book a campsite.
All right.
I've got some parameters here. It can be anywhere in the state, Washington State, and you can use any website or service. Public, private, doesn't matter. But I picked a date that is in one of the busiest weeks of the year. So I wanted to make it a little hard for you.
What is it?
The date is the weekend of July 12th. July 12th is a Friday, so it can be on the 12th or the 13th or anytime around there. The winner is the one who can book the campsite fastest.
All right. When can we start?
Okay, I should jump in to say, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to have a newborn this summer, so I can't commit to actually reserving the campsite, but I will go all the way to getting it into my cart. I hope that counts.
I will accept that.
Okay,
Yes.
and I'm actually going to book it.
Okay.
Okay.
I got permission ahead of time from my family.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to reservations or recreation.gov. I'm going the old-fashioned way, and I really like to camp near water, so I'm going to see if I can just put in that weekend and specify or filter something near water.
Okay, and I'm trying to go to Third Beach because we camped there once before, and it was a really nice place to go.
Okay, I'm putting in the dates. Oh gosh, I'm nervous. Let's see. Anywhere in Washington State. Here we go. Okay. Tent camping, waterfront.
Okay, and I am just like, somehow I ended up in Michigan on my map, so I'm scrolling over.
You're in Michigan?
No, this is not intentional. Okay, Seattle, zooming out.
Okay, I am selecting something on Lake Entiat, kind of following our recommendations earlier to try to pick something that's not the most popular, because it's right by Lake Chelan, where we go all the time and where I imagine you couldn't get a campsite. But this is like a smaller lake nearby.
Okay, I remember it's part of Olympic National Park, and I think I need to get a wilderness permit for this.
Oh, mine's not going to work. It's only first come, first serve. I can't reserve anything here.
Oh, good.
This is so hard. Everything says unavailable. Okay, you know what? I'm going to Hip Camp.
Oh, no. Okay, you're going private.
I am, because there's nothing available publicly.
Okay, I'm looking at the Olympic National Park Wilderness Planner map.
Joshua, you may have to let go of your original plan.
No.
It's all about being flexible, right?
I'm going to call the Wilderness Information Center real quick at Port Angeles.
I'm definitely going to win.
Thank you for calling the Olympic National Park Wilderness Information Center. All wilderness permits must be reserved on the website www.recreation.gov.
Yeah, I know about that.
About 3 to 5 days before your trip, you will receive an email with instructions for printing your permit at home.
Okay, that's not going to work.
Now I'm on Harvest Hosts, which is one of those websites that's like Airbnb for campgrounds if you own a farm or winery. And there's a bunch of farms that are available, but I'm trying to figure out a way to find out if they have a water feature. I just really, when it's hot and when I'm camping, I like to be able to splash, you know? I'm kind of a child that way.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the dirt has the campground I want to go to.
Oh, I have to log in. Gosh darn it.
Maybe this is an exercise in lowering expectations.
I can't make them any lower. Okay, I'm logged in. This is a private hip camp called Brenda G's Land. It looks pretty and wooded. There's a fire pit and a river. I'm going for it.
Oh, no.
Okay, this is in my cart. Riverfront Forest Camping 2 at Brenda G's Land on Hip Camp. It is more expensive than a campground. It's about $50 a night for 2 nights, so the total is $123. And if I were to reserve it, all that I would have to do at this point is click.
Ding, 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 ding.
Oh,
we
no.
have a winner. We have a winner.
Monica
so won the game.
I am the camping queen.
Okay, Joshua, tell me about what just happened here.
Okay. I'm so embarrassed. So I was set on this one campground, which is actually a beach. I figured, okay, the reservations for these opened up this morning, actually.
Oh, wow.
On the day when we're taping,
Yeah.
April 15th. And so I figured, okay, I'm too late to get one of the ones that's in a more highly sought after, but I can go to this place, Third Beach, and...
Too late because it's 11 a.m. and they opened up this morning?
Yeah.
At 7 a.m.?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been 4 hours and all of the good ones are taken.
Yeah, I mean, people love the wilderness permits,
Yeah.
and they reserve them as fast as they can.
Yep.
So I figured, okay, I'll go to this beach, which is part of the wilderness, but has unlimited numbers of people who can go. And it's lovely. And we will go, I was going to stretch the parameters a little bit and go on, a Thursday.
Yeah.
So that I could get the best campground there. And maybe even we'd leave on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But what confused me is that in all the attempts to get to the actual page where I could rent that wilderness permit,
Yeah.
I kept getting like dead ends on the website on recreation.gov and nps.gov. And I can't quite explain it. I have seen this website before, so I know kind of generally where it is, but I just got lost in the details.
Well, it sounds like you're not the only one that probably gets lost in the details.
Yeah,
How
that's true.
are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling a
You
little...
look frustrated.
Yes, but after this failure, I will go home and I will probably call the Wilderness Information Center in Port Angeles again, and I'll actually leave my name and number, and they'll call me back and they'll tell me how to do it, and then I'll be consoled. And
well, I wish you good luck, and I can't wait to hear if you actually get the campsite. We will update you listeners next time to see if he actually gets it.
I can guarantee I'll get the campsite.
Yeah, it just takes you a little bit longer.
It just will take me a little bit longer.
I will say that I have been there many times, and this is one of the things that's so frustrating about trying to book camping is it feels like if you're going to go with a public spot, you have to get on as soon as they open. Every single government agency has its own website. So there's the national parks one, and there's the state one, and there's the municipal one. And they all have their own quirks and things that make them challenging. And you have them all open in a million tabs, and you're feeling the time crunch and just trying to get your spot. And that is the campground crunch. So even though this was sad for you in the moment, I feel like it also is something that a lot of listeners can probably empathize with experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that's it for Booming this week.
Do you have a question about the economy or need someone to vent your camping horror stories to? Email us at booming@kuow.org.
Yeah. Although, you may have stories about how wonderful your camping trip was, too.
We'll take those, too.
Yeah. As always, special thanks to all the listeners out there who financially support KUOW.
You make this show possible. So if you want to help out, go to kuow.org/donate/booming.
Our producer is Lucy Suchek. Our editor is Carol Smith. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
And I'm Joshua McNichols.
And we'll catch you next time.